Hey guys, how's it going? I'm the Duke Vitaly, your favorite lo-fi, most well-adjusted music YouTuber, and welcome to a new series, one that is makes no sense for how I'm dressed today, how I look today. Um, I don't know if it makes much sense at all, but I'm covering this for a specific reason. One of the first charts I ever covered was the Blackgaze chart, and that chart was kind of bad. The quality of the music was like 50-50 split between great and not great. But for some reason, the audio in that video is like borderline inaudible, and it consistently dropped like way too low. So I boosted the gain a ton when editing it, but overall, it just really wasn't that great. So what else would we be covering but the Blackgaze Depression Guide? This is one I've had on the back burner pretty much since that video, and I just saw it and I was like, you know what? Might as well cover some more Blackgaze. I didn't even cover that much Blackgaze last time. But, today we're covering something a little different. A lot of really interesting little niches or niches. I don't know. I've talked about this before in this chart here. But it is a sort of guide where it covers different emotions with Blackgaze. Because Blackgaze, it's the soy sort of aspects of black metal. It pushes it way in sort of the alt directions, and you actually get so many different genre descriptors that apply for all these albums so far. And I've gotten a little past what we're going to talk about today, because today we're talking about all the happy albums, which I have some criticisms about as well as some positives, but I am rather excited to get into them. And I'm a pretty big fan of Blackgaze, as I've covered a few albums both this year and last year for their the album of the year status, as well as I really got into the genre last time I covered the chart, because honestly, almost half of the albums on that chart were phenomenal and stuff I just put into my favorite albums of all time. Austere with that one album that I can't remember, Woods of Desolations, Torn Beyond Reason, was phenomenal. Lantloss went way more in the post-metal direction, which originally I was kind of skeptical about. But now, actually, after looking through this chart, there's a whole lot more alternative directions it's taking that I can kind of apply it a bit more. Of course, Sunbather, that's the be-all, end-all Blackgaze record, even if it's probably not the best. And Lantloss has other records, as well as Heritoire and many other bands. But today, we are covering the happy albums on this specific depression guide. And this is a fun little chart here, and I think there's a lot of heart put into it. A bit of a soy angle. Let's be honest. This whole chart here feels a little bit like a black metal sort of friend of mine on Twitter, just like put in their favorite albums. And a lot of my black metal friends on Twitter have not the best taste in black metal, but it's fine, I guess. It's still fun to check out. Still a lot of passion. But before further ado, might as well get into this chart. And first we start off with the happy part. And knowing what we're about to get into, Lantloss's Melting Sun could totally be in this section, even if it's not the happiest. This is the happy section. And believe me, not all these albums are actually happy. And we're going to cover 6 albums today, which I'm glad it's not a crazy amount. But I'm excited to talk about them real quick. And first, actually, is Sunbather by Death Heaven. That is in the happy section. And I want to say straight up, not a happy album. It's a rather melancholic album. And it kind of... It took the already registered sort of happy-ish Blackgaze sound, or melancholic rather. That was the really popular thing at the time. Bands like Alcest really popularized that. And it took the sound and just kind of pushed it in a slightly more metal territory, and added a whole dosage of post-metal as well. And the shoegaze was very strong, and the multiple guitar setup was great too. The bass playing is kind of just filling in the space, but it still works totally fine. I also got to give credit where credit's due. Daniel Tracy on the drums, I believe, is actually a rather talented drummer. But if you haven't listened to Sunbather by Death Heaven yet, really, that's the most iconic Blackgaze album there is. It's the one that really pisses off the true cult black metal heads. You kind of know what its placement in black metal culture is. I think it's a great album. I'm going to give it a great. A lot of good post-rock stuff, some really excellent melodies. The vocalist, whose name I can't remember right now, his vocals are really, really awesome. Really, really screechy. Sort of edging on like screamo style. but it's got a kind of a wretched quality as well. Just a great album overall. And of course, Deafheaven's got some other good albums too. Their first and their third albums are both considered very good. And their latest album, I was kind of mixed on, but the last 2 tracks I think were rather good. But Deafheaven is a band that if you haven't heard of at this point, you might as well give them a shot. And the quality drop-off is imminent because the next album we're covering is by Violet Cold. One of the worst albums of 2021, I believe, was by Violet Cold. So here we go, I guess. But this is Desperate Dreams, a much less progressive album, a very short, very tight album. All these songs have pretty much pop song lengths, but I hate to say it. Well, not really, but it's kind of funny for me to say this. I don't hate this album at all. I think it's actually kind of good. It's basically the whole post-metal territory, lightning fast build-ups, really aggressive sort of like slightly krautrock bend where it just kind of pummels forward and forward. Sorry, I had to grow a little bit in between cuts. Talking about Violet Cold kind of shrivels my manhood. There's a very fast playing style going on here, so if you can't say one thing about this album, you can't say that it's boring. And that's even saying the fact that it gets kind of repetitive. The synthesizers on the first track are not good at all, but on the later tracks, they're still cheesy, but like they're not terrible. And this is a loud album. It's also very tight. Kind of got a consistency thing going on. Kind of odd for Violet Cold. And this is a whole lot more screamo bent than anything blackened. It's not quite reaching the wretched territory or nearly any of the emotions, but it's got sort of a passionate angle. And I can kind of almost respect that. This album is going to get an okay from me, and it's really all I can really say about it. And next, we're getting a bit of an indie darling. Bear with me for a moment here. I know we're covering some unique names in these last few videos, but this is Njikada? Njikada. Oh my lord. The album title is Nyin. I sound like an idiot. It's NJI period NJIIJN period NJIIJN. That was 3 I's on that final one. So I guess you could call this 1, 2, 3. Njikada. Whatever this band's name actually is. They're kind of an indie darling band. And by that, I mean they were kind of an early trendsetter when it came to Blackgaze, and not for really Blackgaze reasons. They're a 2-person band that really had a sort of cult following on MySpace. No physical copies of really any of their stuff. Their albums at all are a bit hard to find. And in a way, if you like TRHA, the weird sort of like necrotic black metal band, it's got one of my favorite albums of this year currently. If you like that band, and I mean by like that band, I'm like if they're your favorite band because of that specific sound, then you might like this album. And the thing is, I love that album, and this album to me was kind of disappointing. It's 4 lengthy tracks, and along that regard, I was like, oh, this is going to be some crazy psychedelic jam piece, because they both have a psychedelic element to them, both of these bands here. But it was really missing a whole lot for me. It ended up being kind of boring. And if there's any sort of influence here that's kind of interesting, it's like there's a bit of harsh noise that seems to be added on top. And it doesn't seem to be as a result of guitar feedback or any sort of feedback. So it seems purely intentional. And it seems like it's layered in between. And unfortunately, I don't think it's added too cleverly, but it's certainly unique, I'll say. If there's any track you should listen to here, the final one is about 20 minutes long, and it's got some really solid melodic moments. And if there's any point for me where music gets like too lo-fi, it's this. I think when you're like 1 degree above this, you can have like one of the best tones of all time. Bands like Tra or Minima or any of those sort of necrotic black metal bands. But this one just dips a little too DIY, a little too homegrown. It's seriously crunchy. It's the crunchiest thing ever. Maybe not as crunchy as like a Revenant Marquee, but they're a different beast entirely. But I'm feeling an okay here. It's certainly an ambitious record. I'll give it that. I respect these guys a lot for this, but I've heard this band actually has a lot better projects, and some other projects, like I think their final full length ever was like just a heavy psych record, and apparently a good one at that. And the next band is Skyforest with the album Unity. This is a Russian one-man Blackgaze band, and after doing some research, the one man behind this project has 3 or 4 albums on this project, several other Blackgaze projects where he has several albums each, a couple black metal projects which he contributes to. And when I see someone like that, I get very skeptical because it makes me think that your time is stretched very thin, and it makes it seem like your time is very unfocused, and it makes me think that you're not doing a lot of quality control. And I'm correct. This album is not that good. And it's another thing about some specific countries out there, just their black metal scenes are not very good. Russia, when they had the Blazebirth Hall scene, I think that had a kind of a repetitive sound, but it was a very good sound. But kind of after that, it's been kind of lifeless. Kind of like Italy, I've not seen a lot of straightforward Italian black metal over the past several years that really appeal to me. But there are some more avant-garde black metal acts, specifically under like the Void Hanger Records banner. Half of them suck, half of them are good. And naturally, another Russian Blackgaze band, Skyforest here, you have a really mixed bag. Now, this is as symphonic as Blackgaze can get. It's big and symphonic. And it feels very, very folk metal. It is not nearly as pretty as it wants to be because it's all synthetic strings, but it's decent, I guess. I do like one element of this album is that the metal style drumming that gets into the blast beats and like the thrash rhythms and the huge tom fills, I think gives it a really climactic feeling, and it's used sparingly, which I think is a strong choice. But unfortunately, this thing has mostly singing, and the singing sounds totally like some random European country's neo-prog project. And you guys know how I feel about neo-prog. But is this album terrible? No. Would I listen to it again? No. If it was played in my friend's car, would I be happy about it? Not really. I'm going to give it an okay. I don't think it's the worst thing I've ever heard. It's not even objectively bad. It's just there's a lot less going for it than there should be. But so far, if you guys are wondering, Violet Cold is currently the second best album on this project. Until right now, because now we have the band Botanist with their album 6, Flora. Now here's the thing about Botanist. Botanist is an outsider black metal project, kind of along the lines as Death Heaven, where even though they're not strictly Blackgaze, they're one of those bands that I feel like people flock to just to make typical black metal fans like upset. Or they're part of like this sort of like, oh, I'm super hip with the times movement in black metal. And when it comes to that, no one does it better than Botanist. Because the thing about Botanist that's really interesting, and some people don't get this, they don't have any guitars. They have a bass guitar, but instead of guitar, they use a pedal-assisted hammer dulcimer. So you got the huge board of strings that they hit with these little mallets that typically have like a padded ball at the end, but they're just hitting like strings, and it's a bit of a percussive sound. And you are probably wondering, how does that work in a black metal melodic context or a harmonic context or whatever? It works phenomenally. In terms of riffs for this album, it doesn't get a lot better. Really, a whole lot of different like varieties added here, and it's 99% rhythmic. And a lot of these songs are sort of a pop length, but don't let that deceive you, because a lot of these go into each other, and half of this album feels like one major movement, and it's really impressive the way it does that. Not to mention the hammer dulcimer tone is gorgeous. Would I consider this an album that's necessarily happy? Sure, but it's got more of a peaceful, in touch with nature feeling. It's also got a bit of a grim, atmospheric black metal quality that I think is something that a lot of bands have lost their way with. And what's cool about this is it feels naturey and atmospheric despite having such a strong melodic content. And I know I say that, but that doesn't mean it has no atmospheric riffs. It does have atmospheric riffs. It has them for days, and they're fantastic every single time. The vocals I've heard were criticized in a live setting a few times, but after hearing them, especially on this album, I think they're totally fitting, and they're used pretty sparingly, which I'm totally fine with. I love sparing elements added to just about anything, but basically, I kind of sold on Botanist as a band. I really want to check out their other stuff. The drumming is also tight as well. The tone of the whole thing is just super impressive, and I urge you guys to check this one out. This is the second great album on this list, and honestly, you might be able to convince me it's better than Sunbather. And the final happy album on this chart is a bit of an outsider pick. This is a band that I noticed recently was in the fans also like section of the Deaf Heaven page on Spotify. And if you like Deaf Heaven and you have other tastes in things, I normally don't trust you. And this is the band Astronoid with the album Air. Now, the thing about this is it's very outsider when it comes to Blackgaze. Harsh vocals, I don't think I heard a single second of harsh vocals on this whole project. The Blackgaze melodies themselves, in terms of tremolo riffs, very sparing, and it seems like the Blackgaze tone they went for was really approached by accident. And hearing the drumming and the singing on this thing, it feels a whole lot more sort of power metal than it does Blackgaze. I'm not going to disqualify it, but I'm just letting you guys know that now. This thing is cheesed up to the max, the cheesiest thing ever. Super much like, wow, I love the sunset, let's sail away into the sunset, things are going to be good forever. And it's ridiculous, but it's got a sort of neo-prog energy as well. So if you don't want neo-prog mixed with your power metal, I wouldn't blame you. That sounds like an awful combination, but it's not the worst thing in the world. I will say this sort of prettier Dragon Force vibe works sometimes, and this comes from a guy that actually really likes Dragon Force, at least their first album. I think their first album's got some riffs, and the speed is really something that's appealing to me. I don't take it super seriously. It's really just a fun album for me, but that's not to really deter away from the quality of Dragon Force's debut or Air by Astronoid. I will say the vocals and the guitar tones are rather boring, except for the tremolo sort of shoegazy guitar tone that they're going for. I'm pretty sure there's a bunch of layered guitars here, and it does sound nice. And the riffing style is very unconventional for Blackgaze. That's why this thing is kind of hard to sort of associate with the rest of these albums here. Can I give anything for this album other than the sort of mid-quality I've described it as? Yeah, the last two tracks are just great. They feel kind of triumphant. They got a good tone going for them. The vocals aren't pulling me out of the experience too much. They're very energetic, and they're fun. And that's why I'm feeling like I'm giving this album like a low good. Just because those low last two tracks were so spectacular. And that's the happy section. Just a quick little 6 albums. Not a whole lot of quality. And I'm not surprised at all. And one of these I wouldn't even put in the happy section. I'd put it in at least the neutral section, which we might cover in a week or two. Kind of intermixing this chart with the shoegaze chart, as well as a couple other projects I got going on, because the shoegaze chart, I'm trying to cover 10 albums at a time, and on this chart, I'm trying to cover every section in each individual video. But that's about all for today. What do you guys think of Blackgaze as a genre? What do you think of these albums? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you have any Blackgaze recommendations? I know I gave some at the beginning, but I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. I'm really excited to cover this some more, and I hope you guys are doing well out there. So if you guys could leave a question, comment, or concern down below in the comment section, I'd really appreciate it. I want to hear you guys' feedback. And of course, my social medias are in the description if you want to hit me up or just follow me on anything. Also, I don't know if you're watching this, but if you're there, Leah, hi. Nice to see that you're watching my video again. But yeah, that's about it. Hope you guys are doing well. Have a good day. Bye.